All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Benny and the Guest. With you, as always, me, Ben. Today, I'm joined by my new friend Josh Patterson. Josh, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I look forward to it.
Yeah, me and Josh actually kind of hit this off pretty quick, but Josh is the founder of the podcast Rethinking Faith, where he actually interviews a lot of people about from what I can tell, it's about kind of like their process of understanding faith, understanding theology, really, and different aspects of it, different types, like how it all goes for people. So, um, I don't want to give too much away about that because there's a lot to dive into just on that podcast side. But Josh, from some of the stuff I could read about you, you kind of had your own journey with faith and stuff and kind of what went on. So maybe start us off where you're from, how that was, and what let that childhood into adulthood. What went on there?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. So I'm here on the East Coast. I am still here in Maryland. Um, I love it. I'm a big Crabs fan. That's a Maryland thing, and Old Bay. So here for those things too. Um, but I guess like I kind of, I guess in regard to like the faith or spirituality side of things, I grew up in like a nominally Christian home where we would go to church on like Christmas and Easter kind of thing. And then my parents ended up going on some retreat and got like super involved in church stuff. And so then we started going all the time. And then things got a little bit weird. And when my middle brother was in seventh grade, he came out to my family as gay, and we got kicked out of the church. We were told we were no longer allowed to go there.
Oh my
Um,
Lord.
and so that started off kind of a weird thing. But I still continued going to church, these kind of things, and eventually, I'm gonna skip many, many years. But when I graduated college, I started working in vocational ministry. I became a pastor. Um, I did that for like 6 years, but I had a again, we could talk about it if you want, but, like, some pretty not great experiences, working in the church, and so I ended up, leaving church world. I don't do that vocationally anymore. I became a professional brewer. I
Oh
made beer
wow.
professionally
Hell yeah.
for, like, 3.5 years.
Both
That was
serve the
a
world.
good time.
Both serve the
Yeah.
world great. Can I
Yeah.
can I can I jump back a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Two things. One, you told that story about your brother, and then, you fast forward a little bit and you get to you going into college for all this. Um, did you feel like a push to do that, or was it like an internal push? Like a lot of people have that, like they say they were called to it, and then some people they're kind of pushed by their family to go to that. How do you stand on that for like why you went to go do that?
Yeah, I think at the time I would say that I felt, some kind of call to ministry. Um, Growing up in youth group, I was always fairly involved in like 7th, 8th grade, a youth pastor put a microphone in my hand and said that I should speak in front of people. So a little bit of, encouragement too, I guess, from those around me. But, even in college, like, I didn't go into college anticipating uh, like becoming a pastor or something like that. I started out as a computer information science major. Um, I found out after like a year that I'm shit at programming, and so it's maybe not not a good career choice for me. And ended up doing graphic design and student ministry. Um, and so it's kind of how that went
Yeah.
down.
And then after that, you said it wasn't a great experience. If you could just, you don't have to give a full story of it, but because, um, I went to Catholic school, so like
Okay.
there's not a lot. I went to Catholic school up until high school, and then I went away from
Hmm.
that, and now I go to like a non-denominational church. But
Sure.
but like I guess my upbringing, like through the church, you were just mostly altar boys, which that was really your involvement, or like the parents did like fish fry stuff. There's not really a lot of involvement, but like there's like like summer school, but I mean, so if you could like dive in that, like what did you have? What were your kind of roles in that, and then what turned that sour for you?
Yeah, so, like, the involvement, I guess, as far as a kid goes, I there was not really the equivalent of, like, altar boys. I know in the Methodist church that we went to, I was an acolyte sometimes, so I gotta, like, carry the I don't know, like a pole with a candle on it and light the other candles,
Oh yeah,
during the
same
service,
thing.
that kinda thing.
Same thing.
Yeah, yeah, similar. So, um, I did do that, but
Acolyte's
in
cooler, actually. That's a
yeah.
cooler name. Yeah.
Yeah, the acolyte and the cross bearer, so someone else would carry, like, a big
Oh yeah.
cross or something. Um, yeah, so I did that, but in youth group, which yeah, we had that's where I was fairly involved in, and I was, like, a student leader, so, like, I gotta help, like, lead small groups of my peers, and they would have me, like, preach sometimes and things like that. Um, but as far as getting involved in the church world itself after college, when I graduated, I worked for a really cool organization called Youth for Christ, which is a parachurch organization. And I started like they call them campus life clubs, but I started a campus life club for a high school in Maryland, which I loved. That was a really great experience. Nothing bad to say about that. But then I ended up taking my first like official like pastor job at a church in Florida. I was hired as a teaching pastor, and I was there for 8 months, and it was about 8 months too long. And there I experienced, and I'm not using these terms lightly, so this is just honesty. Verbal, emotional, spiritual, and borderline physical abuse at the hands of the head pastor and the founding pastor.
Wow.
So I quit that church for good
Yeah,
reasons.
as you should. As you should.
Yeah, 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 and I ended up then going to, another church, a Methodist church, kinda like I grew up in, and, um, I was a youth pastor at that one, and that church was a lot better, but there were still some weird things that went on, mostly the issues there had to do with staff dynamics and some just really unhealthy leadership, things like that, um and so I ended up leaving there. My wife and I, we moved back here to Maryland, and I worked at a non-denominational church, that I have 0 qualms with. They were called Seneca Creek Community Church. I worked with them for about a year and a half, and I loved it, but, basically the damage had already been done, and I just, I felt like I couldn't do that kind of work anymore in a way that was healthy for myself, but also healthy for the other people involved, right? I didn't want to cause harm to other church members or something because I was angry and jaded. I don't need to push that on them.
For sure, you're gonna have a salty taste in your mouth after that type of stuff. Like, there's no way to not hold a grudge. It maybe eventually you get over it, but like, especially right after, like, there's no like that's very very troublesome behavior to come from, and then just expect to be fine going forward in the same line of work. So I can sure attest to that. After all that instance, so what got you going after that? What did you start doing? What got you through all of it?
Like what got me through the like continuing to work in the church or after I left?
Well, what? No, I understand the continuing to work in the church, I guess, because you still feel a purpose. But
Hmm.
um, what made you ultimately leave? Like I said,
Oh,
this is
leave
the
the church.
Well, what made you was the final straw, and then after that, where did you decide from there? Because that's a lot of time spent, in your. At, I know at my um, at that age, in my mind, I had an idea, and like you, it went astray, and you're like, so I guess that's a two-part question of what led you to like get out of there, and then where did you go from there?
Yeah, so getting out was kind of a very long process because I felt like Um, I don't know, I felt like I was giving God a middle finger or something like that because I had my identity and my vocation, my job kind of um interlocked with one another. Like I thought that Josh Patterson was pastor, that's who I am. And to kind of pull away from that felt like scary and difficult, and like I said, like I was doing middle finger to God or something like that. And so I worked actually with the one of my direct reports, Pastor Jeanette. She was wonderful. She kind of helped me discern and walk through the process and the decision to ultimately stop working in the church. And I also had a spiritual director at the time who was fantastic. And that whole process took, I mean, I think about 8 months. I was trying to figure out if it was, good for me to stick around or not. So I ultimately um, ended up leaving vocational ministry, but I've always been a nerd, and so I've never gotten away from like theology and philosophy, these kinds of things. I continued doing that, right? So I was podcasting when I started working in the Methodist church, and I've been podcasting ever since, doing my theology stuff. Um, but when I left, I needed something different. Um, and I always had an affinity for good craft beer. And so and I liked working with people, so I got a job before I started brewing, I got a job as a bartender at a local craft brewery, because I could use my people skills that way, right, and talk to customers and that kind of thing, and that ultimately ended up in, me being like, "I wanna make this stuff. This sounds fun."
I can't imagine. I would find that fun going to a bar and you find, hey, I was a pastor, and that opens up a whole world. Like you want to sit down and talk to them.
Yeah.
Um, did you find like in that time frame from maybe even college, you go so far back there to that point where you kind of found a new opening of your life? How did that affect your faith though?
Hmm.
Like how did that go for you?
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely challenging times. A lot of the kind of so there's a word that's used a lot today colloquially, called deconstruction that people use to discuss kind of having your faith kind of like shattered or torn down or taken out from underneath you. And it's this really big kind of mass exodus happening in the church currently, where they're calling it like the rise of the nuns, NONES, people who say nothing in particular when asked about their religion. So there's this kind of growth. And so I had my own version of deconstruction, but it never really happened because of the way that I was treated in the church. Like to me, I was just like, oh, those were just like basically shitty people and they did a bad job at being pastors. And so like it's not like that's not my faith. That's just like people being silly, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that never really affected it. Most of mine just came from asking big questions and not getting good answers. And like I said, I'm an avid reader. And so I read a lot. And that, I mean, that has shifted and changed my faith in pretty substantial, dramatic ways over time. I think Josh 8 years ago might not like Josh today very much. But what has remained consistent is I've always found the teachings and the message of Jesus very compelling. Um, and even in times when, I've flirted with atheism, I've read a lot in the school of Buddhism. Um, I've read a lot of Jewish works, a decent bit of stuff within like the realms of Islam. Um, but the Jesus guy, I've always like his teaching, his message always kind of stuck with me. Um, and so even as my faith shifted and changed, and I changed the ideas about like atonement theories and what I think about hell and gender equality, these kind of things shift. The kind of focus, I guess, never really did. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think the good thing about the Jesus message, and this isn't me coming from my faith personally, the one I've heard
Mhm.
argued the most about it, that how it appeals to people, is that it's about just a lot of the other faiths tend to lean towards acts for the God or whoever you worship, right? Whereas a lot of the teachings of Jesus, it's more of acts of doing good for the sake of doing good because you're going to be saved in the next life, right? But it's not do good acts because you have to get into heaven. It's already given. Just be a good ass person because that's what Jesus was like, and it's like that's like you can understand that. Just don't be a shithead. So like
Yeah, right.
I always like I've started levitating towards that where it's like it's almost a commonsensical ideal of just be a good person in life and that happens. But there's other places that do that too. I'm kind of being stereotypical about it a little bit, but I definitely like what you talk about with you're looking at like different religions. You like to read books too. Like I'm an avid reader myself, and I love the hard part about it though is the more you read, the more you start to question. Like the more questions
Oh, of
pop
course.
up, and I guess
Hmm.
that's a good thing. But then you're like, well, I actually don't know anything like about the world or religion or whatever.
Yeah.
How did you? So you jump into all that stuff, and I see like we talked about, you have so many episodes out. It's so great to see. But how do you jump into something? Well, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, but how, how did you dive into that theological journey?
Yeah, I think the so I never used to read. Like I was the kind of kid that in high school I would never read the books that were assigned and just try to get away with like class discussion or something like that. And even in college, I didn't start reading until I took my first theology class. And so I think theology was just something that grasped me and hooked me. And I mean, I like asking really big existential kind of cosmic level questions.
Yes, yes.
And diving in and enjoying that. And like you said, once you start reading, you start to see all these different perspectives, and then you have more questions, and then you're like, oh well, like these people over here they answer it this way, and these people over here it's this, and like even the different third option over here. And so I think I love the wrestling. Like I think
The debate is more fun than the answer. Like
yes. Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah. Like the journey is more the point than the answer, right? The debate. I love sitting down with, friends. I have friends that disagree with me super hardcore theologically, but sitting down and listening to them and talking and seeing where we disagree and why, I think that only strengthens people. I think it makes you like better friends. But also it helps strengthen your own beliefs and perspectives, because if you're open enough, if you're humble enough to be challenged in your perspectives, and seek, a phrase that I really like using is mutual transformation, and mutual hospitality. If we're open to the other and we're open to being challenged by the other, and in turn they offer the same thing to you, I think that's kind of where the magic is, so to speak. So I love the wrestling. I love the questions.
one of my a lot of my guests, I'm just talking to them about their life and stuff. There's not much of a debate. It's more of a conversation piece. I just had a guest on a couple weeks ago, and she wrote a book on, I don't know if you're familiar with the reincarnation trap theory.
Mm-mm.
It's it went off these ancient, do you know like Sumeria? Like
Yeah.
okay, so those
It's like
theological ideas of um what are they called? Anunnaki, right?
okay.
It's off of the, so it gets really deep, and it's very like mysticism and aliens and stuff. And she believes that the planet is actually ran by demons, and when you die, and this whole thing of Jesus is actually like demons trying to capture you here. Muhammad, I mean, like
Mm,
all these people, right? And we got into a big discussion about it because I was like, it was just when I was getting into my faith, so I was using what I knew, and I read a couple books about leaning into Christianity more. So I kind of had a a box to stand on, but she was very well read with her stuff, even though it's a lot of theory. So like we're going back and forth, back and forth. But at the end, I wasn't even mad. I don't think she was mad either. But like you almost, like you said, that I feel that so much of the conversation piece in it. You're just like, I love this. I'm a little heated, but I love this. This is
right.
this is so much fun, and I either understand my purpose more, or like my understanding, I back myself more on it. I have more to stand on because I defended myself with this, or I can see that person's perspective now, and I understand what they're going for. But
Mm.
I went on a whole thing about that, but I love that captured that perfectly. And those are great moments. Have you had those like a bunch, like with like in the middle of those conversations, you're like, damn, this is crazy, or like stuff like that, or
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Even on the podcast, the guests that I have on aren't always people that I necessarily agree with, but they're people that I think have cool ideas and they're worth entertaining, you know. And I think for me, it's kind of like if I want to be able to critique something, which I enjoy doing as well, I want to make sure that I understand the thing that I'm critiquing well enough to like actually do it in a way that's meaningful and not just like create like a straw man argument or like a fake version of what someone believes. I want to actually seek to understand it first and then be like, is this your position? And they're like, yes. I'm like, okay, well, here's why I think that's dumb. But like, I at least want to be able to understand it, right? And so, yeah, I think I don't know, there's something about that. And also, too, like, there's definitely times when, like, when I feel challenged or when my own worldview and perspective gets challenged, and I can feel that, sense in myself kind of rising up, that heatedness. But I think in times when I'm a little bit more, I don't know, level-headed, and I can ask myself, like, okay, why is what this person just said to me? Why is this making me so angry? What is it about what they're saying that's like, I don't know, making me feel afraid or making me feel like they're challenging my worldview or perspective? And that might be able to teach me something um, about, I don't know, something I need to look into more, or I don't know, some shit that's going on with myself. So, I think also too, like when talking with people, it's always helpful to remember that like people should not be reduced to their ideas. Like you're not your thoughts and your ideas, you're a person. And so I want to interact with you first and foremost as another human being, as a living organism, right? Um, and then we can disagree about ideas. I might attack your ideas, but I don't want that to be me like arguing like you as a person. You know what I mean?
yeah, you never want to.
Yeah.
I think anyone that attacks a person's like um personal like person, as opposed to
Mhm.
like, if you want to attack ideas, that's fine. Like, go for the throat because I want to hear it. But you should never like just start being personal because you don't like that person's idea, and you don't sound like you do that whatsoever. So that's good. Do you?
Yeah, I try not to.
Yeah,
Maybe not on the internet. Maybe behind
yeah,
closed doors when I'm joking around with friends.
yeah, yeah. Or your buddies, you just start making like, well, you,
Oh, yeah.
um,
That's a love language. Calling your friends dumb is a love language. That's how it works.
absolutely. I'm in the army. They say the
Okay.
meanest shit ever, and
Oh, I bet.
you're
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
we wouldn't say that if we didn't love you. And they're like,
Right.
this sounds toxic, but whatever. Yeah, I love you too.
Yeah, I have a couple buddies that are active military, um, and, there's a different level of joking around with them.
Oh yeah,
For
yeah.
sure, yeah.
It'll get a little rough sometimes. Do you
Yeah.
with like all this stuff, you're looking at new ideas, talking to people, and you're trying to come to the table with your own ideals backed, like not to sound, you don't want to sound like an idiot, obviously. Um, how are you balancing that, like with your work life? Obviously, you said you're a brewer, and then you're listening to other people. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so I read a lot still, like, I wake up early, um, every day so that I can read, and, like, also excuse me, doing the podcast is helpful because it forces me to read, because I interview a lot of authors, scholars, theologians, philosophers, these kind of people, and so just the fear of, like, talking to them and not knowing what they said is, like, pretty helpful motivation. So, as far as work-life balance, that's pretty much how it goes for me, and, like, maybe I wasn't clear. I'm not a brewer currently. I'm not doing that anymore. I work for the state now.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, doing, emergency management. Um, and a lot of that 3 days out of the week, I work from home. So that cuts away, like, commute time, right? Um, so that gives me some more time to engage. But also, like, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I have some really cool friends that are very smart, that are, actual PhD scholars and stuff. And so having those kind of friendships is neat. I can learn from them. Um, yeah. And then I don't know. It's just, yeah, put just a lot of my time and energy and effort, and it's like all my brain tends to think about. So it's like a hyper fixation. Like I'm ADHD as fuck, and I think theology and philosophy are one of my like hyper fixations.
Yeah,
So
it's because it's such a deep rabbit hole you can go down of like, you have not only like different religions that you can go down, but like each religion has like such different sects of it that you can like what of I'm probably nowhere near as multifaceted as you, but what's your favorite most intriguing one right now that you're like this is wild to go down?
yeah, the world of theology that I love the most is called process theology or process relational theology, and it stems from there was a philosopher named Alfred North Whitehead, and he created this philosophical and metaphysical system that he called a philosophy of organism. He never called it process, but will call his philosophy process philosophy. And then there were some theologians who were like, "Oh, this is actually really great. I want to try to appropriate that and bring it into the world of theology." And so one of the reasons that they did that was because process thought, or philosophy of organism, does a really nice job of being able to include things like science into the metaphysical perspective. And it's malleable enough that when we learn new things, the philosophy can kind of be um, adjusted to an extent. And it has like a very holistic perspective and understanding of the world. It takes seriously like our actual experiences as people, so experience factors in greatly. um and it's just like a solid system, and so bringing that into theology does some pretty interesting things. There's Christians who would not be happy with some of the theological perspectives that I hold, but that's fine. They can do their thing, and um I'll do mine. But I think some of the most interesting things that it does is the understanding of God shifts pretty dramatically within a process framework.
I
Yeah.
before I had like we said, I had about 2-3 hours to prep for this, and I googled process relation theology probably 5 different times and then I googled your name. I was trying to find like I'm like, what the hell is this? So I had to understand that, and then I found some interviews with there was an article by Medium that
Hmm.
kind of discussed you, and that probably brought the most light, and I started understanding this. And it's a very interesting concept. For those that aren't listening, this is my take on it. It kind of just, you can stab me, Josh, if I'm messing this up. But it,
No,
it
you're good.
it explains how, um, with the process relation theology, I'll let him fix that. But it shows that God is kind of, while he is to a level of omnipotence and stuff, he is not fully there. He changes with time and space and
Hmm.
situations. So if you picture time of what could happen as a straight line, and then you picture us, we waver with it with our actions and decisions. God as well can move. He probably doesn't move as
Hmm.
well, but he moves. Am I getting that right, Josh? Or is that?
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right on. Yeah, exactly. So God.
Sorry, I made a lot of hand movements there. This is an audio only podcast. So, guys, I made a lot of stuff. Sorry, Josh, continue.
No, yeah, you're good. That was good. You're exactly right. So God is, we as people, and actually all of the universe is in process. It's not static. And God too is in process. And so as we move through time, God moves through time with us. And you mentioned the omnipotence thing, which for listeners, if you don't know, that's just a fancy word for saying God is all
Yeah.
powerful. It's a pretty classic Christian doctrine within classical theology. I reject omnipotence in favor of a buddy of mine, Dr. Thomas J. Ord, coined a term amipotence, amipotence, which means love power. And so the power of God within a process framework is love. And so what like I guess I have to motivate this a little bit. Um if we believe that God is love, then and love is inherently non-coercive, then we believe God is also non-coercive. So there are things that God can't do because of God's nature being love. And so that's why the kind of the omnipotence critique is there. It just says God doesn't have that kind of power because of God's nature. And so God is in time with us in each moment. God takes in all the experience of the universe into God's self, evaluates it, and then offers the next best thing in the next moment. And we do stuff, and then God takes that into God's self, evaluates it, and so it's this kind of ongoing process. So God is knows all that there is to know. One of the things God doesn't know is the future because it doesn't yet exist to be known, and so God is constantly learning. That's kind of a break with some classical theism. Um, but it still holds that God is present in and through all things. Within a process perspective, most process people are called panentheists, which is kind of like pantheism, which is the idea that all is God, but a panentheist would say that everything is in God. So the universe exists within God, God exists within the universe, but the universe or God is not just the universe. God is the universe plus something else. So there's a whole bunch of kind of different ideas I just threw at you, but those are some
No,
of the
I
main.
love it. I love hearing all
Yeah.
of it. That's interesting. It's so if you believe that kind of trajectory, right, which you talk about, you're kind of pulled towards that. What about like the Bible and stuff? Is that out the door at that point, or how does that play into the picture?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the depictions of God within the Bible, if we're honest, they vary. Sometimes we seem to have the Bible presenting a view of God that is all powerful, that can do anything and everything that God wants. And then at other times, it appears that God doesn't have that power, or that God doesn't know the future, or that God can be impacted by people. Because, you have Abraham, for example, argues with God and then God changes God's mind, right? Which in a classical theist framework, that's problematic because God can't change. God is impassible, is the word for that. And so or immutable rather. Impassible has to do with suffering. God can't suffer, which is also weird to me because the image in the middle of like the dead center of the Christian faith is a God who dies and suffers. So like um yeah, it's interesting. And so like for me, I think I still read the Bible. Um and I think there are passages that align with process theology, and I think there are some that challenge it. But I think that's just true for like
That's,
anybody's
I mean, that,
theology.
yeah, you could read a farewell to arms, and some of the passages will
Yeah.
hit. But what wouldn't you say also too that the New Testament God is, that's my biggest thing, is you look at New Testament God is so much different than Old Testament, and the New Testament one seems very in line of itself between the Gospels and then Acts and stuff like that. I mean, it's not as prevalent, I guess, because it's mostly Jesus talk, which, I mean, that's part of God. It's part of the Trinity, but the Old Testament, you just have God there, and there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. Like I was just reading. I'm trying to read through it now in order, which I'm in Exodus right now, which is just the worst. It's got to be the worst book in the Bible. Like, how the,
Oh, dude, wait till you
okay,
get to Numbers. Numbers is
yeah.
so boring.
And Leviticus, right? Leviticus isn't that great either. Like, it's all, and I'm reading it, and before when it brings up Moses, and he's like, "Hey, um," or he starts talking to God, and he's like, "You're gonna fix this for me, all these people," and Moses is like, "No, I'm bad at this." And God's like, "No, you're gonna do it. I'm gonna give you a staff that turns into a snake." And and then he just keeps saying no. And then God's like, "Fine, Aaron's gonna do it then too." And you're like, "What? How's this guy like bartering with God?"
Mhm.
So to my point, some of the Old Testament stuff like that, I get that it I don't know if it necessarily flip flops, but it's very up and down, moody, which kind of co-aligns with the what you're talking about with your process theology, where maybe at one point maybe God was more pissed off at some point, maybe he was more understanding at some point. That's how I kind of understood it, I guess.
Hmm.
Do you, with a hard part for me would be if you fall into that, right, and you don't believe he's any of these things. And I would assume at that point you don't truly believe maybe in the Holy Trinity. Um, are you able to find faith in the Bible, or do you just find it as a good literary work?
Hmm.
I went on
Yeah,
a big.
that's
I keep going on big things, Josh. I never do this. I
that's
I
all good.
I love this topic, so I'm just sorry about that. But please.
No, yeah, you're good. I'm just writing some notes for myself so I can try to answer what you said. But yeah, I would one thing I'd want to make a quick distinction that might be helpful is for process thinkers, because when you say that God can't change is a pretty common Christian belief. Process thinkers think God does change, but not the fancy way of saying it is God has an essence, experience, finite. And so God's essence, who God is, which for me I would say God is love, that part of God does not change. So we're not going to like one day wake up and we have like this schizophrenic God who's like hates us one day and then loves us the next day and then 5 minutes later is pissed again. The essence of who God is love. That doesn't change, but God's experience changes moment to moment as God kind of moves through time, learns with creation. So there's that kind of thing. But as far as Trinity goes, there's different ways process people talk about that. Like there are very much Trinitarian process thinkers. Some of them have different ways they go about it. Some people say that God became Trinity, which I mean that's technically heretical. um, but also, there's this joke that anytime you try to talk about the Trinity, you border on heresy because like you can't really say anything about the
Well,
Trinity without
because if you question it, then you're like saying that's not
uh-huh.
real or whatever. That's yeah.
Yeah. So like I'm still fine, I'm still fine with the Trinity. There's I might be a little bit more creative with it than some more traditional um understandings of it. But like within process, I mean that dynamic relationship because process also you have that relational aspect, right? So part of that understanding and process thought is that literally everything is interconnected. Um and everything is interrelated in a very true sense. And so to think then of God as relationship, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, works really nicely with a lot of the relational aspect of process. Because if we believe everything is relationship and then our depiction of the God of the divine is relational, well, it's like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. That works out for us. That God is relationship itself, right? And um, one of the I have an icon actually. It's hanging above my head right now. It's a famous painting of the Trinity, and it's really neat because it's kind of like Father, Son, Holy Spirit sitting at a table together, and there's on the table, like on the side of it, there's kind of a rectangle where it looks like something used to be there. And in the original icon, the artist put a mirror there on the table, and all the members of the Trinity kind of have their hand extended, and so you're supposed to see yourself there in the painting, and the idea is that, we are invited to stand in the relationship of the
because
Trinity,
we
so
are
in that
because we are part of that relationship, and
of
it's
the yeah, we're invited into it. It's
that's
really beautiful,
cool.
it's
Yeah, that's
hanging above my
amazing.
head right now, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Um,
amazing. I like that.
yeah, so I'm still here for the Trinity, not all process people would be, but I can affirm it, it works for me. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
and with the oh, go ahead.
no. I was just saying with the Trinity. I know even amongst if you want to do an overarching theme of Christians, not everybody gets the Trinity. Not everybody really.
Mhm.
It's a very touchy subject.
Yes. Very touchy, and people, have argued about it many, many times, and unfortunately, Christians have killed each other about whose understanding is right. Um, and also, I'll push it a little bit further. I will argue that a process perspective actually makes the Trinity more understandable. And here's why I'll say that. Uh, because with classical formulations of the Trinity, you always see these arguments, or hear this language of substance, like, is Jesus of the same substance as the Father? And this kind of thing. And in the creeds, they'll be very specific with their substance language. And so it's a substance-based ontology. Process thought is not substance-based, it's event-based. And so you don't have these static substances that exist, but everything is rather, um, drops of experience is one way that Whitehead says it, or you can think of it like relational energies. And so if you don't have the substance problem, and you're just talking about everything as relational energies or events, then it's easy to say, like, you don't have to say, how can the substance of God be in Jesus 100% as a man who's like his substance is man? The energies can just kind of overlap and interact with each other. You don't have the same kind of substance problems.
Yeah, I wouldn't even like. I'm not a very sciencey guy, but I would call it like metaphysical, right? Like it's
Yes.
not something on this level. That's a hard part too. If you're really trying to look at it as physically based, then you're looking for rock hard evidence, which is not what faith is really. And then you're
Nailed it.
really, yeah, you're not going to get a solid, like, no one, if they're looking for like a autobiography written by Jesus Christ and God, like, you're not going to find it. So quit looking.
Hmm.
I find that really frustrating with people who are atheist or just against religion. I don't really care if you're atheist or not, or even agnostic or whatever. I really just don't like people that are just like, well, faith just doesn't make sense. And I'm like, well, that's the whole point, kind of. Like,
Hmm.
it's just something you believe in. I don't know. Like, you could get down to nitty gritty with physics if you want to about faith, but it's a thing. Um, so yeah. Do you find I don't know if I think I saw on a couple podcasts you were able to talk to them, Islam, Buddhism. I don't know if you've looked into
Hmm.
like Zoroastrianism or any of these older number one Eastern or just older religions, and have you found talking points? Have you come across the table with some of it? And is there some stuff that you're like, I don't know if this is for me or this is really necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very interested in religious pluralism, um, and specifically, I'll use the language of deep religious pluralism. I have some nerdy theological reasons for it, but on like a pragmatic scale and perspective, um, I want people to stop having to kill each other. And like when we argue about religion, we kill each other a lot. um, you know,
Since
and
since like a long time ago,
right,
a long
right.
like we got to figure it out, guys.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think if we can get religions to come together, and talk, I'm not saying that they have to agree and say that everybody's thing is right and it's all relative, but if we can have conversation and seek genuine understanding, I think that would get us, pretty far. And so when I engage religious pluralism as a process person, all the things that I said about God being, present in and through all things at all times, alluring me forward into the good and beautiful and true. I believe that about everything everywhere. And so, um, I think I'm comfortable saying that um, God meets us where we are, meets people where we are, and interacts with people in ways that make sense to their own cultural sensibilities, and all these kind of things. And so I think that there are genuine similarities in a lot of religions, and I love looking for those overlaps. But I also think, like to your point, there's a lot of differences, and I don't want to squash those. I want to celebrate them because I think that's we should celebrate the kind of differences. And if we just reduce all religions to like, oh well, they're basically just saying the same thing. They just whatever, that does violence to my faith and to my Muslim friend or whatever, because I'm not honoring their religion fully either. And so I think it's helpful. There are things I've found in other traditions, that then, I come back to the Christian tradition and I'm like, wait a minute, we have this idea in Christianity too? Holy crap, I didn't know that. And so then this like beautiful gem that, maybe I found from Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist. He passed away a couple years ago, but he was a Buddhist teacher. His books are fantastic. He's written, tons of fun things like Jesus and Buddha as brothers, or Living Buddha, Living Christ. So I think I get excited about that. But yeah, of course, there's going to be things I disagree with and that are a no go zone for me. In some traditions.
Yeah. Are you as you've gone on this journey, I think you started back in what, 2019, 2018, somewhere around there? Um
Yeah. See, I graduated college in 2016, so yeah,
okay.
around there. Yeah.
Do you find that you found a more grounded base in your faith
Mm.
of like this stuff, or do you feel like you're opening the door even more and you don't really understand it at all? Because like that's a lot of episodes to go through to talking to a lot of people, and I'm sure you have some stuff where you're like, hell yeah, this is what I believe, and then other stuff
Hmm.
you're like, well, what the hell is going on? So what do you got going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that um my faith has gone through ups and downs. I think probably a lot of people can say that. But I think faith and belief are two different things. And so I would say that even though my beliefs have shifted and changed over time, I think my faith has continued to grow stronger. And so I'm going to steal a definition of faith from a philosopher friend of mine, Dr. Aaron Simmons. He's awesome. He's a Kierkegaard scholar, a phenomenologist. His book, Camping with Kierkegaard, is awesome. It's not about camping. It's like all outdoors. He like does like the downhill mountain bikes and stuff and like fishing, and so it's a
Oh
cool book. But
wow.
anyway,
Yeah.
worth checking out. But his definition of faith is risk in a direction. And he, as an existential philosopher, he's big on recognizing that, hey, we're all going to die. And so he's like, what is worthy of your finitude? When you think about the question, like, or when you acknowledge that I am going to die one day, and it could be tomorrow, what is worthy of your finitude? Go and do that thing. And so for me and all my studying and reading and interviewing super smart people and this kind of stuff, I have found love to be worthy of my finitude. Paul Tillich, another theologian, says that our faith is our matter of ultimate concern. And for me, love is of ultimate concern. And so my faith then is I risk myself in the direction of love being ultimate, of love being true. And the Christian story, the Christian tradition for me, um, is a beautiful story of love that I feel like is worth risking myself in the direction of. You know, um, if I'm wrong and all this Jesus stuff is a whole bunch of hoopla, um, then like hopefully, um, by you know loving my neighbor as myself and loving my enemies and, taking care of the orphan and the widow. Hopefully, that has made the world a better place than it was when I got here. And if that's what happens when I'm dead, fine. That seems worth it to me. So that idea of faith as risk um, has only gotten stronger. I am more and more convinced each day that risking myself towards love is worth it. Even if my beliefs, you know, can oscillate a bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I push real hard with that, where it's the I guess my definition of it would be like, or not definition, but my understanding, um, my faith and understanding God and Jesus and Holy Spirit, like all that, right? Makes me feel good, or not makes me feel good, but makes me have a comfort of knowing everyone around me. One day I'd see them again because He saved everyone, right? That's my faith, and that's what I'm comfortable with.
Mhm.
But if for some reason, let's say let's say I didn't have faith, okay? Or let's say I did, but I'm wholly wrong for some reason. Um, ju- that's what our damn it, our pastor's doing a whole series on it of discipleship and how it's
Okay.
the why versus the what, right? So the why you do everything is because you received the grace of God. So all you
Mm,
can do in return is do the right thing as Jesus did, which is walk the path of Jesus, right? Do no harm, help people, blah, blah, like all the kind things we think of as decent human beings. And if you're a philosopher or a ethics person, you
mhm,
know these without teaching of the Bible. Like it's common decency, basically, is what you would explain it as. Um, if there were, let's say, my faith crumbled tomorrow, I would hope I would still act the same way based on ethics.
mhm.
Why? Because that puts out that existential energy towards every other person in this world. There's a book called The Four Agreements. I can't remember who
Yeah,
it's by. Yeah, it's a great
I
book, right?
highly
It's so short, but it's so good. It's like it's like 100 word or 100 pages, but it explains it really well of how putting negative energy, you're gonna get negative energy back. So just put positive energy out there, and you're gonna do that. And I've started really relating my faith with I keep using the phrase and I sound like a douche, but metaphysical energy, right? Like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's that cross dimensional shit that everyone wants to hear about on Joe Rogan, right? Like it's it's us putting good stuff out there and karma, right? You get it back, or excuse me, you help an old lady down the street. Maybe you find a dollar bill in your pocket, some random stuff like that. I equate all that stuff, and I love that because I think it teaches people at a base level, even if you don't have faith, you should still be a good person because it's gonna
Mhm.
come back to you and those around you. Because I don't know, you said you're married, right?
Yes. Yep.
Do you have any children yet?
We do not. We have 3
Okay.
dogs and a cat though, so, like, I'd
And
have to get,
that's close to
count
one or
for
two.
something.
Yeah, it
Right.
is. Um, I think you guys like understand. Um, when you get older, you don't have that as many people around you as you thought you did. So
Mhm.
then you're like, well, who am I going to be with in this life? Well, does it pay to be a jerk? No. I want to have a good life. Like, I don't want to be I don't know. I keep running back to that, but it's such a good mentality. Do you are you speaking at any places, or are you kind of just getting out there on the podcast and kind of pushing this kind of thing? Cuz it's the episodes I've seen are just solid, man. They're
Hmm.
the topics and the people, it's great. Are you just pushing that, or you got other side projects, or where do you see yourself going with this?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I appreciate the compliments. Yeah, the podcasting is a lot of fun, and I'm tied in with a bunch of podcast buddies. Like it's not advertised as such, but my show's on a network. So there's a guy, oddly enough, his name is also Josh, who kind of like manages the podcast, and there's some other really cool shows. that my friends do that are on there, that are worth checking out. So I want to keep doing the podcasting thing. I do speak places, like I get invited to preach in churches from time to time. Over the summer, I was the keynote speaker for like a week long regional youth conference in North Carolina. That was super cool. So I love speaking. The main thing that I try to, excuse me, communicate to people when I do get the opportunity to speak is that regardless of what I say, if you hear nothing else, I want you to know that the truest thing about you is that you are known, seen, and loved by God. Or, as my friend Trip Fuller likes to say, God knows your name, knows your face, and gives a shit. And that's what I want people to know and take seriously. So I try to get that out there. I do some writing. Um, I've have some essays and chapters and things like that published um, in books. I'm working on a book project right now, bringing radical theology and process theology together, which is fun. So also, like, I'm in school currently. I would love to earn a PhD and, like, I don't know, have some letters next to my name to make me feel better about
Sure.
myself or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
um, but I would like to, yeah, I love the world of theology and philosophy, and I hope to keep doing that on the side until maybe one day it becomes a sustainable, enterprise or something like that. But until then, dude, I love doing stuff like this and connecting with cool people online and having fun conversations. And yeah, I don't know, try to spread a little bit more positivity and bringing people together, especially in fractured times and things like that. So
Absolutely, and especially where we're at, and it's like we both talked about. It's about that experience together instead of the
mhm.
outcome of it, and I think that's what we had tonight, Josh. I can't thank you enough for coming on here and talking to me about all your projects, which I would preach to other people. Whether you're solid in faith or questioning it, like go check out Josh's stuff because he is putting out like just great listening material. Like go check it out. Um, Josh, I'll post your stuff, but thank you
Oh, thank
again.
you.
Yeah, thank you again for coming on here and talking to me. It was a pleasure just for me. I don't really care if anybody else likes it or not, but I had a good time. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, dude. I had a blast, and I'll be happy, like once it's out, tag me and stuff, and I'll happily share it and promote the work that you're doing as well.
Absolutely, man. Thank you guys for listening to us. Thank you, Josh, for coming on. Y'all have a good night. Talk to you later.